Cuba's criminal underworld is as complex as its political history. From pre-revolution mob control in Havana's casinos to modern-day black markets and smuggling rings, Cuba's gangster stories span decades of secrecy, corruption, and bloodshed. These are 10 real gangster stories from Cuba, true tales of crime, power, and survival on the Caribbean island. One story: the Havana Mafia era, Cuba before Castro. In the 1940s and 1950s, American mafia bosses Meyer Lansky and Lucky Luciano turned Havana into a gangster paradise. Lavish casinos, nightclubs, and hotels were built with mob money, and the city became a playground for wealthy tourists and a haven for organized crime. The mafia ran drugs, gambling, and prostitution, often with the cooperation of corrupt Cuban officials. Two story: Meyer Lansky and the Hotel Nacional. Lansky, one of the most powerful mobsters in U.S. history, made Hotel Nacional in Havana the epicenter of mafia operations in Cuba. He hosted the infamous 1946 Havana Conference, where top mob leaders met to divide territories and plan their expansion. Lansky's dream of a criminal empire in Cuba ended when Fidel Castro came to power and nationalized all foreign assets. 3 story: the fall of Batista, end of the mafia's reign. President Fulgencio Batista was supported by both the U.S. government and organized crime. His corrupt regime allowed the mafia to flourish. But when Fidel Castro's revolution succeeded in 1959, mob businesses were shut down overnight. Casinos were destroyed, mobsters fled, and Cuba's golden era of gangster tourism came to a violent end. 4 story: the mysterious death of Rolando Masferrer. Rolando Masferrer, a former Batista ally and anti-Castro militant, fled to the U.S. after the revolution. He became deeply involved in Miami's exile underworld, including arms trafficking and assassination plots against Castro. In 1975, he was killed by a car bomb in Florida, a hit many believe was linked to Cuban political or criminal enemies. 5 story: the Mariel boat lift and the rise of exile crime. In 1980, Fidel Castro opened Cuba's borders during the Mariel boat lift, allowing over 125,000 Cubans to flee to the U.S. Among them were criminals and prisoners released by the regime. This wave contributed to the rise of violent Cuban-American gangs in cities like Miami, where Marielito criminals became feared for their ruthlessness. 6 story: the cocaine pipeline through Cuba. Though officially communist and anti-drug, Cuba has been implicated in cocaine trafficking routes between South America and Europe. Some reports allege that high-ranking Cuban officials have profited from allowing drug shipments to pass through the island, using military or diplomatic channels to shield the operations. Another story: black market networks in modern Cuba. Due to economic hardship and strict government controls, black markets in Cuba thrive. Criminal networks smuggle fuel, medicine, meat, and even US dollars. Entire communities rely on these underground systems to survive. While not as violent as cartels elsewhere, these groups operate in secret and with cunning precision. Another 8 story: the Havana human trafficking rings. Despite tight surveillance, human trafficking has been a growing issue in Cuba. Some criminal organizations lure women with promises of jobs abroad, only to exploit them in sex work or forced labor. These rings often operate out of tourist-heavy areas and are linked to international crime groups. 9 story: illegal rafts and smuggling to Florida. For decades, Cuban smugglers have organized dangerous balsero raft journeys to Florida. What began as individual escapes became a criminal business, with traffickers charging thousands to transport people illegally. Many of these operations are connected to larger smuggling syndicates based in the Caribbean and the U.S. 10 Story. Los Marielitos, the Exile Gang Legacy. After arriving in the U.S., many Marielitos formed tight-knit, violent gangs in Miami and New Jersey. Known for drug trafficking, contract killings, and armed robbery, these Cuban exile gangs became feared in the 1980s and 1990s. Though their influence has waned, their legacy still echoes in the streets of Little Havana. From glamorous casinos and mafia bosses to modern smuggling and underground networks, Cuba's gangster history is filled with contradictions, shaped by revolution, exile, and survival. These 10 real gangster stories reveal how organized crime has both shaped and adapted to the island's dramatic transformations. Like, share, and subscribe for more true crime documentaries from around the world.